Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist, and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online Mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla. All right, so let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Sabine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's really lovely to have you here. And it was interesting because before we recorded, I was reflecting on how I have accidentally found myself doing work in this eating disorder prevention space, which is actually a space you intentionally inhabit. And I kind of found my way here after years of kind of work early on. Tell me a little bit about what your title is. What do you do?
Yes. So my official title is an eating disorder recovery coach. So I have done, after my physiotherapy training, done added trainings and certifications to, I guess, now call myself that, although it's not a regulated industry and there's lots of problems that come with that. But yeah, I have done my own certifications and trainings to, I guess, feel comfortable in practicing within this scope as a recovery coach. And um, it really is this role that I wish that I had had in my own experience. And that is the space that I now occupy. But outside of that, I also just have this real passion for prevention and early intervention because I think that it's really hard to do recovery work without
Yes.
addressing the reasons why, these struggles exist in the first place. And that's why I was so drawn to baby meal times and toddler meal times. Your memberships were such a lifesaver for me as a first time mom. And it just felt so aligned with all of my own beliefs and values and hopes for my own kids with food. So I just love the synchronicity and overlap in that. And I'm so grateful for the work that you've done in this space.
Oh, as for you, because I feel like we've kind of come at different things in a similar way. Like I worked for so long with parents who were deep in this fussy eating, feeding difficulty stage. And definitely like there are some eating disorder red flags and things that crop up for families that I've worked with. But it's really been more about that fussy end point when life is so tricky that I wanted to get ahead of the game and like how could we help these families kind of avoid some of these potholes and pitfalls and all of the things. And so, we've kind of found each other along that journey, I think, which has been amazing. Speaking of journeys, tell me about you. Like, what is your journey? How
Yeah.
did you end up in this space?
Yeah.
What's your own experience?
Yeah, so definitely, I guess for me, my struggles with food, exercise, and body image, I put the three together in one kind of category, really didn't start until my late teens, early 20s, when I transitioned from high school in the country to moving to Perth for uni to study physiotherapy. It was just this whole new environment of figuring out friendships, figuring out study, figuring out life, even though I was at boarding school. So I had a level of independence before. I think in hindsight, this was just this whole new level of figuring life out. And just at a very transitional period, age wise, just generally speaking. And what I now know is that transitional periods are really quite a big contributing factor to eating disorders being developed. So I kind of like to call it around this like the genetics load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. So for me, it was this stage where I just kind of started to feel a bit more doubt in who I was. I didn't really feel like I was that great at uni. I was really struggling to find my feet socially. And so all this, my inner critic just started to tell me these things of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, like you're just not enough. And for me, that kind of ended up spiraling into an eating disorder and into trying to find control and enoughness in the way that I engaged in food and exercise. But really, like, again, it wasn't that clear along that pathway. It wasn't like I just decided, oh, this is how I'm going to gain control and feel good in myself. It just started as a healthy lifestyle change. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to be a little bit more careful about what I eat. I'm going to go exercise a little bit more. I'm studying physiotherapy, so I know what's good for me, and I have all this amazing science background and knowledge of the human body, and that's how things just kind of kicked off. But as I said, genetics load the gun, and my temperament, my personality trait, a genetic component. So there's addiction in my family. All of those things contributed to those puzzle pieces for this not just being a healthy lifestyle change and quickly spiraling into an obsession with controlling food, obsessive exercise, and then eventually a lot of body image struggles as well. I'm really grateful and look back, and I'm so thankful that my mum was pretty onto it.
Yeah,
And
wow.
so I really didn't, I guess, have a chance to. I mean, I was deep in it quite quickly, but she was onto getting me support also quite quickly, which really enabled me to get started on recovering and healing that part of me, and being able to not listen to that inner critic, which had turned into the eating disorder voice, and to find my way back to myself again. I'd really gotten to be a shell of a human in my personality and my moodiness, my irritability. I wasn't nice to be around at that time. And yeah, I'm so grateful for her early intervention.
Oh, what kind of time frame are we talking? Like how long from kind of start to when you were in it, do you reckon that took?
Mm. So it's really hard to pinpoint the end. I think that's harder. Started around 19, and then probably the first 12 months, so 19 to 20, deep in restriction. And then the start of seeking help around end of age 20, coming to 21. I would say from then there was another 2 or 3 years of working through disordered behaviors and disordered thinking before I was able to find my healthy again. And that actual part after the first initial year, felt worse than the first part, right? Because that
Yeah,
first year
wow.
is just like, I'm just doing what part of me wants to do. I'm getting compliments for looking a certain way. And my grades got better because I was using study to distract myself from what was going on. And it wasn't until then I guess, are faced with the implications of like health implications, of physical and mental implications of those behaviors, that then when you are asked to challenge that, or your body responds by making you hungry and
Yeah.
wanting you to have more food, that then for me came depression, anxiety, really bad body image, the feeling of losing my identity, losing this control that I had previously. That to me was like the hardest part. And that's where I wish that I had someone who had experienced a similar thing before me, to understand the battle that was going on in my brain, and how I knew that what I needed to do to get better, but to actually do it was something completely different. And so that is kind of what led me to be able to, I guess, do what I now do, is to be that person that I wish I had, to provide hope that I could actually get better, that I didn't always have to think this way or feel this way, or have so much of my brain consumed with food, exercise, and body image. And yeah, just decrease that isolation that I felt in such a really, really shitty time, despite having support around me.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I have so many questions to ask you about that. But it sounds like, to give an analogy, it sounds like you're kind of at the bottom of the mountain at that point, right? And everything just seems like a slog to get better. And especially when you don't yet kind of have that full internal motivation to want to change, right?
Exactly.
Like in
Yeah,
some ways, what's been
absolutely.
happening has been working for whatever reason,
Yeah,
for you.
definitely. And that is part of the work that I do now when I help people, is understanding that those behaviors exist for a reason. They don't just come about for nothing. Like it serves a purpose, and it helps people survive to some extent, right? Get
Yep.
through difficult moments. And um at some point though, it no longer is serving you. It's no longer doing the thing that it promised you to do. And I think when people can start to realize that, or have that moment, that is when that internal motivation comes.
Yes. I almost imagine you in this kind of role as a like tour guide up the mountain, like at the top of Everest
Yeah.
kind of vibe. You're a bit Sherpa, bit leader, helping carry someone's baggage.
I'm definitely going to steal that. I'm the worst at analogies. So, like, I'm just going to pop that one in my back pocket. Thank you very much.
It is all yours. I want to ask about your mum. It made me almost quite teary thinking of her at that time. You know, I'm guessing you were living away from her
I
at that
was,
point.
yeah,
What did she
yeah.
notice in you? Like, have you ever talked to her about that?
Um, no, it is fascinating. I'm sure she'll be listening to this as well. So I love you, Mum. Thank you for everything. We don't talk about it a lot. And I'm mindful that I felt like I skipped over a lot of stuff in that journey, but hopefully that gives it a
Yeah,
snapshot and overview. Um, but I think there was physical changes. So I went away for a prac in Albany for 5 weeks, and I was already very much on the slippery slope of engaging in disordered behavior before then. But I think that ultimately, when I was then left very much to my own devices, when I was in the thick of the eating disorder mindset, and you know what it's like when you don't see someone for a period of time, I think coming back after that period, definitely there was physical changes that they noticed that upped their concern. And I'm going to be really clear that eating disorders are a mental illness. There's physical symptoms, but that shouldn't be the only thing that we're looking for when we're talking about red flags or someone struggling. Um, Outside of that, though, I was so moody. I was so irritable. As I said, I really my personality changed. I became a shell of who I was. And so, yes, whilst there may have been that physical side of thing, um, I wasn't me. I'd lost my
yeah,
spark. I'd lost my confidence. And I was very high functioning. So I could go to uni and I could present at prac and I could do all these amazing things. And to anyone else, probably physically, again, I actually was being complimented on the way that I was looking. Yeah. So it wasn't like I presented in a media stereotypical way of someone
yeah.
with anorexia. And that's a big part of what I'm really like advocating for as well, is that we need to, step outside of this stereotype that we have of someone with an eating disorder, what we see, what we think that someone looks like, because they don't have a look. Um, but yeah, I think those are the things that she I just feel like the moody and irritability was huge.
Yeah, you were different. You were just not
Yeah,
yourself, and there was
yeah,
enough there to suggest like maybe we could get some help with anything that's going on.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
that
I just
wasn't
want to comment,
easy.
yeah,
Yeah.
on that kind of stereotype of kind of the
Mm,
emaciated look, right?
mm.
I think so many people are done a disservice by that assumption because the rate that we have now of people who are in a bigger body at some point have even still lost a significant amount of weight, but are still deemed by the BMI to be within a healthy range. And I'm saying that with like really strong air quotes there. Are being kind of turned away for help because they don't meet a classic diagnosis. And it's just wild that all these other, they can be having all these other struggles, and just because they're not, they haven't lost, or they don't weigh a particular amount, that they're not able to get help. It's actually very scary in our teenage
Yeah,
young people that this is
yeah.
a very typical thing that we see, and they're not being recognized, or they're actually even worse, being praised for
I know.
making
Yeah,
healthy changes because they are now within a healthy weight. And
yeah,
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 it makes me feel ill.
yeah. And again, like I even just to quickly speak on that even more, in my own experience of help seeking, again, a symptom of the eating disorder is not feeling sick enough. So we don't feel like at that time that we are deserving of help, or that there's actually a problem that we need help with. I myself got turned away because at that time part of the diagnostic criteria of an eating disorder is to have lost your period, and I still was menstruating. And so therefore I was deemed to not have an eating disorder, and luckily that's not part of the diagnostic criteria anymore. But again, it's just recognizing that it's so much more complex than that, outside of weight and physical representations of eating disorders, and what they how they present.
That's wild, isn't it? Like, let's leave it to get a little bit more ingrained and part of
Yeah,
your whole being before we do anything. Yeah, wild.
exactly. Yeah.
So with people that you work with, like who are the people that you work with now, kind of ages, and what are
Yeah,
they struggling with?
14 up. So I my eldest client, I think, was 75 a few years
That's
ago.
amazing.
And basically anyone who is struggling with disordered behaviors or has a clinical diagnosis of an eating disorder, that's who I help. It's predominantly females. I have one male client that's predominantly females, again, because I come at it from that lived experience aspect. Um, my lived experiences of being a woman and having an eating disorder and struggling with body image and disordered behaviors. So yeah, a really wide range of presentations. And again, don't need to have a clinical diagnosis because there's, again, lots of, I guess, struggles with that. But
Gray
I
space
can,
even.
yeah, well, there's lots of great space with that. What a nice little drop. Um, so yeah, I think that it can be, I can often be a first port of call, like someone who maybe has never spoken to anyone about their disordered relationship with food before. And I can help them establish that clinical team if it's indicated, because I'm very aware of my scope and I'm not a therapist and I'm not a dietitian and I'm not a medical practitioner. That is not my role. Or I can fit in when someone already has a team, I can fit in as that practical support. So they're already well connected in that sense. And then I come in as the Sherpa.
Yes, love it. Gonna start charging you every time I hear you use that word.
Yeah.
I think that's so helpful though, because there are so many parents who, I'm guessing like your mom at some point, notice these kind of red flags and then don't really know what to do with them, and perhaps maybe are, sent away by a GP, or it feels too full on to go to a,
Yeah.
complete assessment center.
Yeah.
If we talk about like what are the red flags? Like let's say you're a parent of a 14-year-old. What are the red flags that you might see for your teen that are kind of suggesting there's a potential for eating disorder development there?
Yeah, so there's definitely like different categories: behavioral, physical, psychological red flags that we can look at, and warning signs. And these can be found on like the National Eating Disorder Collaboration website, Butterfly Foundation. They're very accessible. I will read like a couple of them off, like literally just from one of those lists, but then I want to just speak to just actually more practically and generally, I think,
Love
from
it.
a home situation. So, but yeah, some of the things that these lists talk about is increased preoccupation or dissatisfaction with body shape and weight, fear of weight gain, eliminating certain food groups, going to the bathroom after meals, drinking excessive water throughout the day, sudden or rapid weight loss or weight gain, delay in puberty, fine hair over your body, um, fainting as well, right? So those are some of the written down warning signs and red flags. But I think on a more practical level, I want to just allude to changes, because we know our kids the best, right? And so while some of those things might be present, I think a lot of the times, a lot of the things aren't. So one of the big things I think is like when they start to say no to things, and I'm talking adolescent. Like my expertise is really not with under 14s. Like
Yeah.
I'm adolescents and up. So saying no to things that they used to say yes to, wanting to control the kitchen, so wanting to bake and be in control of making the food, not like to a level where they then you notice them maybe not following recipes like exactly, making little swaps. And then when it goes to serving the food, maybe not having the thing that they've just baked for everyone else, or giving themselves like a very small, like much more smaller portion, hiding and being secretive around food as well. And then I really also I like that preoccupation one. I think the preoccupation about like food discussions and their body, looking at like recipes on Pinterest and being really kind of, yeah, obsessive about food in that way, I think are more like it's more practical examples of how that those things could kind of show up day to day.
Yeah. Would you think as well, like a change in dress sense as well could
And
be
yeah,
a,
it can, but
like either trying to disguise their body more, which may be also a part of, also, I guess we shouldn't need a disclaimer, but like being interested in recipes isn't a,
exactly.
generally concerned, but it's that change and that real kind of deepness or obsessiveness about it and that kind of controlling nature, right? And so the same with
Exactly.
clothing, like
Yeah.
if they're all of a sudden trying to disguise their body or just seeing these differences that feel off.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is a gut thing. Like,
Mm,
absolutely, just baking a cake for everyone doesn't automatically mean that someone has an eating
yeah,
disorder, but it's the context and the nuance around it.
absolutely.
And I think equally though, yes, it can be like the baggy clothes, but it can also be actually, especially if there has been
Mm,
body changes in a way that has meant weight loss or dropping, it can actually be wearing less clothing and
yes,
wanting to yeah, be show that off a little bit more. And again, the context around that
yes,
matters, but ultimately the change and the obsessiveness, the nature around those changes, like, are they just wearing that, but if you told them that they can't, or you need to do something else, like, are they getting really angry and upset about that then,
yes,
and then like engaging in something that feels like a really drastic reaction? Again, is that just puberty?
yeah.
I think those
It's hard,
those
isn't
are
it?
things. It is really hard. It is really hard, and that's why I think that always, like, err on the side of caution. We'd much rather kind of be on top of it and have open conversations and be like, oh, I noticed this. Am I just being ridiculous, or is, like, are you okay? Rather than just being silent and waiting for them to grow out of it, because I
Yeah.
think that's really harmful.
Yeah. If you're a parent and you're seeing some kind of concerning red flag, what do you suggest as a starting point?
You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know exactly what to do, but be open to learning and listening. So, going to a GP, and if the GP dismisses it, go to another GP.
Mm,
The Butterfly Foundation does have a list of um, service providers. It's you do have to go through a little bit of a process to be featured there, but it's still not a guarantee. I think sometimes there's still issues that can come up. Yeah, I think that have the conversation, start the conversation, don't sweep it under the rug, and allow yourself to be imperfect in how you go about this. There's a great website, actually, feedyouриnstinct.com.au. I'm not sure. Feed Your
I'll find
Instinct.
it and link it.
And yeah, that you can put in some things that you were concerned on. So it's yes, no, not applicable. And then it can spit out some recommendations of what it thinks you should do. It's quite good, actually. I quite like it.
Yeah, awesome. And so I
Mm.
guess it's that kind of communication, even if perhaps your teen or your whoever it is you're raising this with doesn't want to hear it, that
Yep,
you are laying a bit of foundation, letting them know that you're there and able to talk when they
absolutely.
want to.
Yeah, yeah. The no judgment approach. And again, I think that is sometimes where when I work with the 14 to 16-year-olds, it's not necessarily that I'm actually saying anything different to what you would be saying as a parent, but the role is just different. And
Yeah,
so you have to hold that boundary of ensuring that they do get the support despite them not wanting to. But they will then not feel like they can have certain conversations with you just because of the nature of the illness as well. And so just having continuing to be a safe space for them to come to express their feelings, because it does get really hard, I think is beautiful to be able to do that.
I love that. If you are talking to teenagers, if you were talking to a group of teenagers or teenagers on their own, what are some of your key talking points? Are there messages or what comes up regularly?
Yeah, I think because I do less group conversations. I used to do talks at schools. I don't do them as much anymore, so I work more individually now. But when I used to do the group um, uh, conversations, it would really be focused on making help seeking a priority. So yeah, not being afraid to ask for help and to speak to someone about struggles and about your thoughts. The role of a friend. So how we can be supportive in what we talk about at lunchtime. So that is not commenting on people's bodies, not commenting on people's food choices. And if you have concern for a friend, going to a teacher, going to the school counselor, going to your parent, to express that concern. Those are the things that I would focus on rather than specific behaviors that people might be engaging in, because we know that that isn't helpful in this space. When we're talking about self-harm and suicide, we know that they are really great things to just be really explicit about. Eating disorders, the evidence is there's less so.
Excellent. Thinking about that, like with the beauty of hindsight now, is there anything that you wish someone said or did for you when you were younger in a similar way that could have had an impact? I mean, it's probably wouldn't have changed things, but is there anything you
Yeah.
think that would have made a difference for you?
I mean, the one thing that when I was recovering, I started to learn so much about the inner critic and self-worth and self-esteem. And I that is what kind of spurred me to start with these like workshops with teenagers and introduce like Pilates and movement in a way that was building their self-worth and their self-love, as I used to call it 10 years ago. Um, and I think that I just wish that that had been discussed at schools, that there was this idea of an inner critic, that everyone had this voice that kind of would tell them that they weren't enough, but that didn't mean that they had to listen to it, nor does it mean that you have to change your body to try and prove yourself to be worthy of love, acceptance, all of those things, worth. So again, I don't necessarily think that that would have changed the trajectory, so to say. But I do think that having more space to have those conversations, and I am seeing it more and more now in schools, the more holistic well-being approach, mindfulness and gratitude and all of those beautiful practices being taught at a young age, I think is awesome. Outside of that, though, again, coming back to the role that my mum played and the relationship that I had with food growing up, I think was just such a beautiful example that I could, when I was struggling, turn back to. So I didn't have a lot of diet culture in my home when I was growing up. And so that enabled me to, I guess, better be able to create those new pathways outside of what my eating disorder was telling me, rather than what I see now is often when we come from I guess, the places that have a lot more diet culture conversation, or a lot more discussion on negative body image in the homes, that then those core beliefs are more ingrained for the individual. And again, still possible to change, still possible to adapt, but just that little bit extra of level of hardness. And so that for me is that prevention aspect again of what the conversations that we're having in our homes, that I'm so grateful that I had that background to fall back on.
So would you say then, like as parents, we can do our best to be neutral about food, to not comment on people's bodies. Obviously, it's no guarantee that we can protect our kids, from, the gun and the trigger in these situations, but that when they are in a place for recovery, there's almost less unlearning to do, like they're kind of
Yep.
starting from a stronger foundation.
Yep.
And so everything that we're doing now isn't in vain. Like all of these parents that we're working with who are, doing their best to kind of take those, conversations, not be talking about their weight or not be hating on their body in front of their kids, and really trying to keep food neutral and not getting into that kind of moral stuff around food choices. It is never in vain.
Yeah, no, never. We're all just doing our best, and that I think, we can do all the right things, and they're still their own entities, and they're still getting messages from a million other places outside of the home. But to have that solid grounding to come back to, I cannot fathom that that's in vain. I cannot
Yeah.
fathom that that is wasted energy.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you to give a piece of advice to parents. Is that the advice, or have you got anything else you'd like to add to
No, that's the advice. Yeah.
I took it
I
out of your
think,
mouth, sorry.
yeah, no, not at all. I love that. It comes down to that. And I think practically, again, for me, that looks like what I do in my own home is the absence of conversations, almost like the absence of commenting on bodies, the absence of a scale that we're stepping on, the absence of good and bad food. And again, my kids are 5.
Yeah.
I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know. And I struggle with that lack of control. But I can just hope that for now, it being age appropriate, to role model body neutrality and food neutrality is what I can control and what I can give them.
Absolutely. And I think then our kids learn as well that those things aren't our priorities, right? They're not
Yeah,
important to us. And so we will love them regardless of those things. And
exactly.
part of that is that kind of strong sense of self, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the self-worth, self like identity, that kind of stuff is huge in all of this work.
Yeah, amazing. So if we kind of jump in again to the work that you're doing with people who are either kind of in this early stage of eating disorder, exploration, diagnosis stuff, or they're in it, I can imagine that it's really hard to trust somebody to reach out to, like a coach or even, as another member of a care team. What does it look like? Like if somebody was to consider working with you, what can they expect?
Yeah, so I guess the two values that I bring into my work, core values, are non-judgment and honesty. So I explain straight out that I'm not here to play detective. I'm not here to find out what the eating disorder is hiding. Like if you're at that stage, then the work is not appropriate. I'm not the right person for you at that time, because that's just not conducive to what you are trying to do and the client's trying to do. So really getting clear on what the person themselves actually deem to be their own struggles and their own challenges, not deemed by a clinician, not deemed by a parent, not deemed by anyone else, but what they see to be the struggle and the challenge, what they identify their goals to be. So what they actually envision for their future, how they want their relationship with food, exercise, and body image to look like, and then helping them join the dots. So helping them define their gray space of healthy and then help them find that is what that kind of looks like. Practically meal support and like social eating, challenging fear food. That is like the bread and butter of the work that I do, again, because I felt that there was such a big gap in actually knowing what I needed to do and then actually doing it. Um,
Tell
that's
me more
that's
about
the
meal
role
support.
that so I go out and eat with people, and I sit with them and help them through the anxiety of picking somewhere to go or choosing something off the menu. I help talk through the guilt afterwards, and we have specific goals around, again, depending on what the person is struggling with. Is it the fact that we're eating out, or is it the specifics of the meal? Is it the timing of the meal? All of these different things can be someone's challenge at different times.
I find that so powerful, like listening to you talk about that, because that is just so out of the scope of a treating team, right? If you think about a hospital or a clinic kind of base, obviously there are things that you can do there, but to actually go with someone to a place that they want in their time, that's just got the flexibility. I feel like we're so lucky to be able to play a role like that in the community that is quite flexible,
Yeah,
very tailored, is where that person is at that point in time. Like
yeah.
that's
Yeah,
hugely
it's
powerful.
real life. It's real life. Like that's again that we can present really high functioning at work or at school, or in our studies. But then when we come home or when we go to the grocery shop, we're in a mess. And that is my role, to be at the grocery shop with you, or to help plan the dinners that you want to have, or to actually help you prep your dinners, right? So yeah, really taking away that front that you're holding up to everyone else as being okay, and actually recognizing that that isn't that isn't normal. You don't have to actually live in that way, with that being so consumed with these guilts and with this control and with these thoughts. There is actually a place that you can get to where you're free of that.
That's incredible. I can imagine you. Here's another analogy for you. I can imagine you like as the other person on their shoulder, right? They've got this kind of one voice really in one ear, really loud. And then they've just got this like calm, balancing voice from you,
Mm.
just kind of helping through a lot of that inner critic stuff and a lot of that eating disorder voice.
Yeah, that's like really, I mean, that's my work. It's the healthy self versus the ED self. And we're building up the healthy self and strengthening the healthy self. But at times where that ED self is just so strong and prevalent in that moment of needing to take opposite action to recover and to get through, I can step in and help them find that healthy self voice, or be that healthy self voice for a time.
Love it. How long do you work with people for generally?
It's so varied. so
Yeah.
varied. Yeah, again, it depends on where I'm coming in. Um,
Yep.
so I mean, I've had a six months to 2 years.
Yeah. I can
Yeah.
imagine you like your steady presence can be really helpful for people as that kind of always in your corner person.
I hope so. I hope to think that. I do sign off with my emails always in your corner. So
Oh,
I do like to really see that, yeah, consistency. And again, for me, not being a clinician allows me
mm,
space to not expect certain things from people as well, like and really meet them where they're at. And that to me is that individual kind of service that helps yeah, reduce the shame sometimes around
yeah.
not meeting expectations as well. And then shame just feeds the disorder again. So just helping to strip that back sometimes can be really beneficial whilst the clinicians are holding the boundaries and holding those expectations. Both are important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Tell us, I have been repping my grey space cap. Tell
So
me
cute.
about the grey space and kind of what that's all about.
Yeah, so the grey space really came about because I just see so much black and white thinking when it comes to health and well-being, whether that's in on social media or whether that's with the clients that I'm helping, because the eating disorder does strengthen that black and white thinking. It is a cognitive distortion that occurs. But just even on social media and in diet culture, there's just so much black and whiteness around what is good and what is bad for us. And I just like to remind people that we are fluid human beings, that what's good for us on one day might not be the best for us the next day when it comes to especially exercise as well. We need periods of rest, and then maybe we've got energy to do a little bit more, and then maybe everyone's sick and we can't do any. And just allowing ourselves that just because things don't go to plan one day, or maybe for a few months we eat more chocolate or more convenience food, that doesn't mean that we've fallen off a bandwagon. That doesn't have to mean that we're bad human beings or not healthy. It's just this stage of this life. So just allowing for, again, nuance and context and self-compassion for health to look different at different times, I think is just what I would like to spread more into the atmosphere, into the world.
I love that. And I feel like a big part of that is just normal eating, right? Like that
Yeah,
normal eating is about sometimes having more, sometimes having less, sometimes having lots of vegetables, sometimes not having a lot. And it really that kind of living your life, which is a messy, chaotic life. And I
exactly.
just think as a society, we are just obsessed with optimization. Do you know, like how can we strive and get the very best meal and the very best exercise and the
Yeah.
most, highest thing you can. And like I
And the
just get
shortest time
exhausted.
frame,
Oh,
like got to do it now.
and it
Like,
has
oh
to be
my
a
God.
slog. Like, oh,
Yes.
why?
Yeah.
Why does it have to
Yeah.
be a slog? Can't
Exactly.
think of anything worse.
Exactly.
Imagine how
Exactly.
freeing it is when you can just like dabble in it a bit and that's enough.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And not be our whole identity, have
Yes.
actually space to just be a friend, be a daughter, like be a boss at work, like not be a boss at work also, like just to watch Netflix, like all of that exists without this yeah, it doesn't have to mean that we are disregarding health or not caring about being well. I actually think it emphasizes those things and those goals.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with that. Where can people find you if they would like to work with you, if they would like to buy a Grey Space cap to support the work you do? Where can they find you?
Oh, thank you. So worthbeyond.com.au. So WORTHBEYOND is my website and my business name, and on socials as well. I also share a lot of the more, like, I guess, prevention and just general diet culture chat on my personal account. So Sabine McKenzie on Instagram. That's less specific ED stuff.
Yeah, I will link both of those in the
Thank
show
you so
notes if
much.
people are interested. Thank you. I feel like we align on so many things, and we've been lucky enough to find each other over the years through multiple ways. I think we've had personal connections and work connections and all sorts of things. But I think there are so many people doing great work, and so to have you here to talk about that and kind of share some of the work that you're doing, I think it's really inspiring. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I feel so honored and privileged to, yeah, have had the opportunity to speak about something that I'm so passionate about. And I know that you feel very much the same on so many things. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you.
What a love fest. Lovely to have you.
A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.